Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Direct Support Grants Program webinar. I am Janelle Murray, Advisor Access to Finance with Caribbean Export. Now, as you are aware, Caribbean Export launched the new Direct Support Grants Program on Monday, August 31st, 2020. So the purpose of this webinar is just to walk you through the details of this new program, paying particular attention to the application process and how to complete the application form. Now, some of you may be familiar with our direct assistance grant scheme, having applied for and been awarded a grant in the past. So you may already be familiar with some of the terms and conditions of this new program. However, there are some distinct differences between the two programs, and we just want to highlight those differences during this webinar. So the purpose of this webinar is not only to inform you about the details of the new grant program, but to provide answers to any questions you may have about the program or about completing an application for the grant, thereby increasing your chances of being awarded a grant this year. With me today are my colleagues, Mrs. Sonia Bowen, who is the Program Advisor for Access to Finance, and Ms. Tanya Cummins, our Financial Assistant, Access to Finance. And what we're going to do is to take you through our presentation, the entire presentation, and then we will take your questions at the end. Now, just to give you an overview of what we will cover, we will look at the background or the genesis of this whole program. We will talk about the eligibility criteria, what projects are eligible, what project expenses are eligible and ineligible. We would look at what funding is available, and then we'd have a discussion about the tranche disbursements, which is a new element of this program. We will take you through the process map, how the entire grant will work during the implementation period. And we will also look at the implementation period or the duration of the grant contract. We will talk about how to submit an application, what is the deadline for applications, and we will go through in some detail the application form and budget. We will look at the application checklist and talk about the evaluation process and the grid we use for evaluating the applications, and then we will look at the award of the grant contract. Now, just to give you a background, an overview of the program. Now, we at Caribbean Export understand the impact of the coronavirus pandemic globally and particularly on small and medium-sized enterprises. We recognize the challenges SMEs face as a result of the pandemic, particularly economic and financial challenges. But we want to assure you that Caribbean Export remains committed to the development of SMEs across CARIFORUM. We all recognize that our support during and after the pandemic will be vital to the growth and development of our region's SMEs. Therefore, what we did in collaboration with the Caribbean Development Bank was to design and disseminate a survey among CARIFORUM SMEs to determine the impact of the pandemic on SMEs, as well as their resulting needs for recovery. And what we received was an overwhelming response or overwhelming need for financing, particularly grant funding with relaxed terms and conditions. Hence, we designed and developed the Direct Support Grants Program in response to this need for grant funding to help businesses recover from the pandemic. Now, to be eligible for a grant, applicants must be a sole proprietorship, partnership, or limited liability company. They must be legally registered and operating in a CARIFORUM member state. They also must be operating or trading for at least 3 years, supported by the last 3 years financial statements or financial reports, and that is the income statements and the balance sheets. And they also must be able to demonstrate current export capacity or activity or demonstrate the potential to export goods and services. Entities not eligible to apply will include business support organizations, educational institutions like universities, schools, and vocational centers, NGOs or non-governmental organizations like human rights organizations, associations, charities, and so on, and a firm that has an open grant contract under EDF 11-1901. And that simply means that a firm who would have received a grant last year but have not yet or has not yet submitted a claim for reimbursement will not be eligible to apply for this call. But if you have already submitted your claim, then you are eligible to apply. Now, some eligible projects would include resource efficiency and pollution prevention and management, and that simply means if you have projects that deal with renewable energy, environmental systems, waste management, and so those projects are eligible. We're also going to support marketing and promotions, which would include branding, packaging and design, brochures, the development of e-commerce websites or the attendance at virtual trade shows. We will support those projects. We also will support business recovery activities such as research and development, innovation, technological upgrade, increase in production, the purchase of raw materials, market testing, and so on. We will support that. Equipment purchase and upgrade is also an eligible project. We will support certification. So if you're going to pursue standards like ISO 9001 or become FDA approved or so, we will support that. Capacity building, so if you want to undertake training programs for your staff, that's another eligible project. Business continuity planning, like risk assessments, or if you want to develop a management strategy or business continuity plan, those are also eligible projects. And the protection of intellectual property rights, such as the registration of trademarks or patents and so on, those are also eligible projects. Now, some eligible project expenses, well, to be considered eligible, costs must be for goods, services, or activities to be provided or delivered during the implementation period. They must be necessary for carrying out the action. They must be provided for in the contract. They must also comply with the principles of sound financial management and have actually been spent by the beneficiary or his or her partners. So during the application, you would identify if you would have a partner on this project, and if they also contribute to the project in terms of financial expenses or so on, that would also be considered an eligible project expense. And they must be recorded in the accounts or tax documents of the beneficiary or his or her partners and be identified or identifiable and backed by original copies of supporting evidence. So essentially, no cash payments will be allowed because everything, all activities, all payments and expenses must go through the financial accounts of the company. All right. So some eligible project expenses would include the purchase or rental of equipment, whether it's new or used, the cost of services provided that they correspond to market rates, the cost of consumables and supplies such as raw materials, parts, and accessories, and subcontracting costs. So if you're going to hire a service provider or consultant to undertake part of the project, that is also an eligible project expense. Some ineligible project expenses, I will go through the list with you. However, this list is not exhaustive, but essentially the ineligible project expenses include administrative costs or overheads, individual scholarships for studies or training workshops, travel costs such as airfare, hotel, and per diem expenses, the acquisition of motor vehicles, that's an eligible project expense, We're not covering salaries, wages, or other human resource expenses, neither debts and provisions for losses or debts, interest owed, purchases of land or buildings, currency exchange losses, all taxes and government-imposed customs duties, credits to third parties, interim financing costs, commitment fees. Those are all ineligible project expenses, as well as bank charges and service charges from your financial institutions or banks. Payments not made through financial institutions. So again, cash payments are not eligible, and contributions in kind either. Now, what's available for grant funding? The minimum amount is 5,000 euros and the maximum amount is 15,000 euros. So the grant, the application that you are making should fall between 5,000 and 15,000 euros. And the implementation period is 6 months. So you'd have 6 months to implement your project once the application has been approved and a grant contract is signed. You'd have 6 months to implement the project. Now that 6 months will start the day after the beneficiary signs the grant contract. So if, for example, the grant contract is signed by the beneficiary on December 12, 2020, then the implementation period will be December 13, 2020 to June 12, 2021. And now I'll hand you over to Tanya, who will walk you through the tranche disbursements as well as the process for the grant.
Thank you very much, Janelle. Okay, so we're going to look at the tranche disbursements. For the first tranche disbursement, the beneficiary must submit supporting documents in accordance with Annex 4, our procurement and disbursement procedures, to Caribbean Export for verification and approval to receive the first tranche. For the second tranche disbursement, the beneficiary can only receive the second tranche if Caribbean Export verifies and approves the utilization of 100% of the first tranche disbursement, as well as receive supporting documents in accordance with the disbursement procedure. For the third tranche disbursement, the beneficiary can only receive the final tranche if Caribbean Export verifies and approves all required reports, including the narrative and financial report for utilization of 100% of the second tranche disbursement. Now we're going to have a look to just give you a basic overview of the process, the disbursement process. So step one, the grant contract is signed by both. Implementation period begins the day after the beneficiary signs the contract. Step two, for the first tranche of funds, beneficiaries source competitive and comparable quotations for the purchase of all goods or services. Then submit electronically to dsgpinfo@carib-export.com for approval. Now the quotations must adhere to the following. Quotations for costs 10,000 euro and above, you are required to submit 3 quotations. Cost less than 10,000 euro, you will be required to submit 2 quotations. Step 3, once the approval of quotations is received from Caribbean Export, as the beneficiary, you must select the most economical vendor or seek approval from Caribbean Export to select another vendor by providing justification. Now, in terms of quotations, you have the option to source quotations for goods and services anywhere throughout the world. So in light of that, you have to try to source the quotations. However, if it's a situation where you will be purchasing some type of specialized equipment or machinery, then you still have to source the quotations. However, if your choice is not the most economical vendor, you will have to write to us at Caribbean Export and justify your reason. Once it's approved, you can go ahead and initiate your transaction with that vendor. Now we're to step 4. beneficiaries enter into the contract with a service provider and secure original invoices for goods and services from the most economical vendor. Now we know that contracts is not always applicable in every instance, but if it is, you need to sign the contract. Beneficiaries, step 5, beneficiaries submit the contract and the invoices to Caribbean Export again to dspginfo@carib-export.com for review. Once approved by Caribbean Export, beneficiaries submit the original contracts and invoices to Caribbean Export via courier, along with the original request for disbursement of the first tranche of funds in accordance with the Annex 4 Procurement and Disbursement Guidelines. Step 6, beneficiary receive first tranche of funds within 15 working days of Caribbean Export approving the documents highlighted in step 5. So in essence, once you submit your initial documentation to us for approval, then once it's approved, you have to courier the original documents to us, and within 15 working days, we will approve the documents to have the funds disbursed for the tranche of funds. Step 7, for the second tranche of funds, beneficiaries repeat steps 2 to 5 and submit the following additional documentation in accordance with the procurement guidelines. Now, from this point and onward, it's basically the same steps from 1 to 5 that you repeat for each tranche. With respect to if you have one piece of machinery or one expense, you'll just have to submit one invoice to us, the quotations, the contract. You'll have to submit that once. You don't have, for every stage, you don't have to resubmit another invoice, but you'll be required, as you get the tranches of funds, to submit the proof of payment at each stage. Okay, again, we have been receiving a lot of questions in respect to the tranche disbursement and how it works with the machinery. So we have 3 scenarios here. If a beneficiary is purchasing equipment that is equal to or less than 15,000 euro, what we will recommend or encourage is that the beneficiary try to speak to the vendor and see if there's any way that you can have the terms aligned with the tranche disbursement process. However, if this is not possible, the beneficiary would have to request the first disbursement from Caribbean Export, pay the difference to the vendor, which can be claimed in another tranche and will take the form of a reimbursement. There is another scenario where a beneficiary wants to purchase a piece of equipment that exceeds 15,000 euros. Now, the beneficiary will be required to submit all the requisite documents to Caribbean Export, and after the approval, the beneficiary will be required to make the initial payment of the excess amount to the vendor and submit the proof of payment before any funds are disbursed. Now, the third scenario is where a beneficiary wants to purchase equipment that is materially higher than the 15,000. So we're speaking about if you were awarded a $15,000 grant, but let's say, for instance, your total machinery is 50,000 euros. Now you'll be required to submit all the requisite documents to Caribbean Export, and after approval, you will have the option to fully purchase this equipment and submit the proof of purchase, and you will be reimbursed the 100% of the grant funds. Now, we are aware that in this case, there's 3 scenarios, but we are bearing in mind that there will be other scenarios that will come up as we go along. So we are prepared to address them on a case-by-case basis. Okay, and you can always refer to the Annex 4, the procurement and disbursement procedures. We have a table there in the annex, which clearly outlines the tranches and the supporting documents that you would need after or before every tranche. Now we're going to look at how to apply. The direct support grants program application form and budget template must be downloaded from Caribbean Export's website at www.carib-export.com. This is the only source for application forms and official documents. So anyone who would have had an application form from one of our direct assistance grants, please know that this is a totally different program. Therefore, you need to get the correct form from the website. All other variations of the application will be declared null and void. An applicant may submit only one application for this call. So it's only one application per company. Applicants are required to submit 2 copies of their application package in hard copy via registered mail, courier, or it can be hand delivered to Caribbean Export headquarters. Also, applicants from the Dominican Republic or from Haiti, you also have the option to take your package to our offices in those respective countries on or before the deadline. The outer envelope must bear the title of the call for proposal number EDF 11 DS 2001. All application packages must be received at Caribbean Exports headquarters by the specified deadline date. This includes notarized copy of registration, of certification, or certificate of incorporation. A copy of the applicant's latest financial statements, namely the income statement and the balance sheet for the last 3 financial years. Now, these financial statements must be signed by the owner of the company, the CEO, the senior financial officer, or by a director. So any of those 4 persons can certify the financial statement. Failure to submit the required supporting documentation will result in the application being rejected. All applications must be submitted in English. So all applications must be submitted in English. Applicants must ensure that Section 6, entitled Applicant Declaration of the application form, is signed by the applicant and submitted. Application forms which have not been duly signed will not be considered. Applicants must also ensure that the partners' agreement is signed. Now, the deadline for application submissions is October 2nd, 2020 at 4:30 p.m. Barbados time. At this time, I will hand you over to my colleague, Ms. Sonia Bouen, who will take you through the budget and the application form.
Thank you, Tanya. And we'll look at the budget, sorry. But before we go through the first component of this budget, I just want to point out give you some pointers to preparing the budget. Your budget must provide a clear indication of the goods and services to be procured for the project in achieving its primary objectives as well as the results. So that means your budget must be aligned to the activities that you would have indicated earlier in the application form. It must be realistic in terms of costing of items and must reflect or support the proposed actions in the application. The budget may be completed for the maximum amount Caribbean Export will disburse if awarded a grant. However, if the budget exceeds the amount Caribbean Export will disburse for additional activities, you will, of course, be required to fund the excess yourselves. When you are reporting on the project in Annex 6, the narrative report, you will be required to report on the entire project. That is the activities Caribbean Export will disburse funds for, as well as the additional activities that you may fund on your own. And the final point is that the budget must be completed in euros. Now, component 1 of the budget. These are sample expenditure that we have included here for you. Furniture under component 1. Component 1 will comprise of goods or items that you purchase, tangible expenses, which would include furniture, machines, equipment, spare parts, tools, office equipment, which would comprise of computer or laptops or printers, renewable energy, which would comprise of examples like water security, environmental systems, waste management, greenhouse gases, or AC inverters, also transportation and shipping. If you're going to be purchasing equipment and it's coming from abroad, of course, there's a shipping factor that would be included. So we would recommend that you also put a budget in there for any freight or transportation. And any other expense that we don't have here as an example, you can put under 1.6. And this is component 1, which is for goods. The second part of it, the component 2, this is for services, which would be comprises of items such as marketing and promotion, which would include branding and packaging and product design. Research and development, this comprises of product development, innovation, technological upgrade. Consultants, you might hire a consultant or a service provider to do your packaging or your design, or you might also require the service of a custom broker or website designer or trainer, installation of services. This would require the services of a consultant. Virtual trade shows and conferences, we would reimburse for the booth costs and the registration fees only. Certification, this would include food safety, HACCP, FDA, or ISO, etc. Protection of intellectual property, this would include the registration of trademarks or patents, or any other service that we might not have here. As an example, you could include under 2.7. Now, just give us a moment. We are going to open the application form so that we can go through that with you. We're just going to switch over to the application form and go through the process step by step. Section 1. This is the applicant's information, the name of the company. When you submit your application, you put the name of the company, the head of the organization, the gender, if there are one owner, if it is one owner or two owners, you would put if it is 2 males or the number of females. The same thing would apply for the senior management, the gender of the senior management, your physical address, the telephone number, email, website, and for the main contact, you would include that information as well. If it may be one or you would list the contact for both persons. Under the bank details, you would include your banking information for those applicants who are living outside of Barbados. You would include your intermediary bank details. If you do not know what that is, you can get this information from your bankers. Section 2, the project and the title. In this area, you would indicate what the project is all about or the title of it. Under Caribbean Exports contribution, the maximum amount that we will be distributing is 15,000 euros. Of course, some of you might have, your budget might exceed that amount, as I've noted on the total project cost. You can include the total amount of what the total project will cost you, and this must be reflected in your budget. 2.1, give an overview of the company or organization. Include types of products or services offered, number of employees, export markets, any future growth for the company. This would include, in the text boxes, we just have some clues for you, which would be provide a historical overview of the company, highlight the types of services and goods that are being offered or produced, the number of employees, indicate any export markets and any projected areas for growth. 2.2, give an overview of the project. What we would need for you to do here is to explain and outline the details of each activity to be undertaken. Explain the types of personnel, example, staff or consultants, required to undertake the activity. List the problems, challenges, or issues that the proposed activities intend to resolve or address. Ensure that the proposed activities are in line with the project objectives and the results. The activities must be completed within 6 months of the date that you will sign the contract that we will send to you. Their activities must also be reflected in the detailed budget. An action plan should summarize all activities to be completed, as well as indicate the resources to be used. 2.3. How relevant is the proposal to the objectives of the Private Sector Development Program and the Direct Support Grants Program? This would include examples of if your objectives are measurable, and to find out that, ask yourself how much or how many. How will you know when it is accomplished? Your objectives should be validated by the results. That is an increase in sales, increase 2020 annual sales by 30% for 2021. To determine just a moment. And you need to justify the importance and need for the project. It should be supported, but not limited to, market information, research, consumer trends, or consumer demands. 2.3b, what are the measurable results and quantifiable indicators relevant to the project? That would be an increase in annual sales. Your quantifiable indicator would be the number of products sold for the year. A result would be increased visibility of the company's product. The indicator for that would be production of collateral materials such as brochures, promotional events, advertisements. Another result, increased production output by 50%. An indicator for that would be the number of products produced, the installation and operation of new production equipment, sorry. And a final example for this is conduct market research, and your quantifiable indicator in this case would be the market research report. 2.4, explain the relevance and importance of the project to the company and the needs and constraints to be addressed. Ask yourself the questions. Are the proposed activities in line with the regional private sector development, overall program and objectives? What are the present challenges affecting the company? How will the proposed activities remedy or resolve, improve the existing challenges? What are the implications for the company if the present challenges are not addressed? Are there any opportunities to be explored? How will the proposed activities realize these opportunities? How will the proposed interventions affect the growth and the strategies of the company? These are questions that you need to ask yourself and input that information when you are completing the application form. Question 2.5. How will the project contribute to the promotion of public-private partnerships, innovation, technology, or cross-cutting issues such as climate change, gender equality, and rural development? What we need here is to indicate any value-added elements, environmental issues or concerns that will be addressed by the project. Example, renewable energy, waste management, technological upgrade to a digital platform. Partnerships, development of new products, support gender equality and provision of equal opportunities. That would be provide employment opportunities to youth and women. 2.6, give a detailed description of each activity to be undertaken to complete the project. Include the action plan for undertaking project activities, ensuring that the activities are aligned with the objectives. An example of this would be a virtual trade show, equipment upgrade, or market research. Your action plan in this example is the virtual trade show would take 2 months. The person responsible would be the marketing director and the marketing officer. Second activity, equipment upgrade. This would take 3 months, and the persons responsible would be the manager and the equipment supplier. In our final example, which is market research, this would take approximately 4 months, and the person responsible will be the consultant. 2.7, give a detailed description of the project team. That would be the staff or the consultant who will be managing the project. Include technical expertise, management capacity, experience, and qualification of staff or the consultant to be used. You would include items such as you provide a detailed description of the management team or personnel years of experience in managing the company business. Demonstrate the years of experience and qualifications of the management team or the persons involved in the project. Demonstrate how the existing management structure or personnel have the capacity to complete the proposed activities. If a consultant is to be recruited or hired, the type of consultant required would be stated as well as the level of expertise. 2.8, what is the long-term impact? What long-term impact will the project results have on the company? How will the company or the organization be directly and positively be affected by the proposed activities in the future. You can further ask yourself, how will the product or the service be marketed? An example of this is increase the brand image, which would include increase the company visibility and revenue. Examples to expand on would be the creation of a digital footprint to ensure continuity, development of a website, which would result in an increase in online sales, equipment purchase and upgrade would result in less production of wasted and shortages, increased productivity in domestic and export sales, staff training, which will increase or improve the staff capabilities or skills, and development of a business continuity plan. 2.9. What financial and institutional structures are in place or will be implemented to ensure sustained business operation after the project ends? An example of this will be the implementation of the project will enhance or increase production of goods, which would result in increased revenue. This revenue will be utilized to facilitate improvement in other areas of the company. 2.10, indicate how the proposed activities exceeding the maximum grant, if applicable, will be financed if approved. An example of this would be through a bank loan or through an approved line of credit. 2.11, describe the company or the organization that will be a partner of the applicant in the project. You would input the company's name if you're going to have a partner, the details of that partner, which would be the company name, the physical address, the telephone number, email, and the history between you and your partner. In this example, the supplier of specialized equipment and technical training for equipment operators. This is the history between the applicant and their partner as utilized in this example. You also need to indicate the role or the involvement that the partner would have in implementing the activity. The contact person for the name of the contact person in the partner company, their position, and the partner must also sign the actual partnership agreement listed in this application. We do not require or we will not accept a computer signature, but the partner must physically sign the application section of this agreement and also date it as well. You can have as many partners as you want. The application form is expandable. For the budget, I touched on these points earlier. Just a reminder that the budget must be a clear indication of the goods and services that are being procured. It must be realistic in terms of costing of the items or the services that you would require to support the action, and it must be completed in euros. The documentation required that you will need to submit as part of the application process would be notarized copy of your registration of certification or your certificate of incorporation. The last 3 years of organization's latest financial statements, which would include the income statements and the balance sheets. The declaration, a reminder that you're supposed to sign the declaration form. This is section 5 of the application. We have had applicants who have submitted completed applications, but they did not remember to sign the declaration form. They need to input the name of the person or the owner of the company, the position, and the person would need to sign, physically sign the application, sign and date it. A computerized signature would not be accepted. Now we're going to switch back over to the PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to look at the checklist for the application form. I just go through these points with you. When you have completed the application form, just look at the checklist to ensure that you have complied with all of the requirements. 2 copies of the application form, fully completed and signed, are to be submitted. 2 copies of the applicant's declaration form, which is also included in the application form, must be signed. Both copies must be signed by the applicant, signed and dated. 2 copies of the proof of registration of incorporation must be attached to both applications. 2 copies of the latest financial statements, which would be the income statements and the balance sheets for the last 3 years. And these must be signed by the owner. If it is unaudited, it must be signed by the owner or the director or CEO or the senior finance officer of the company. If they are unaudited statements. 2 copies of the partnership agreement must also be signed if applicable. 2 copies of the budget presented in the format requested and expressed in euros. Now, I like to point out here that if you do not submit the budget with the application, your application would be ineligible. The requested contribution from Caribbean Export is equal to or greater than 5,000 euros, the minimum amount allowed, and equal to or less than 15,000 euros, the maximum amount allowed. The evaluation process. The evaluation process is 30 working days and will commence October 5th, 2020. Applications received by the deadline are subject to an administrative check, which will assess whether they have duly satisfied the eligibility criteria. All applications will then be evaluated by members of an evaluation committee using an evaluation grid. This evaluation grid that is presently on screen can be found in the guidelines and procedures. This is a more or less cheat sheet. These are the questions that the evaluators will be looking at and evaluating your application. So if you see these questions here, you can look at the questions and look at your application to see if you have fulfilled the information that is required. You would be, the application will be evaluated on a scoring system. The pass mark is 60 out of 100. So we would advise you to look at these questions in the guidelines and procedures to make sure that you have the required information in your application form. Applications receiving an average score of 60 or greater out of 100 will be ranked according to the average score. All ranked applications, though eligible, may not be awarded a grant due to the pre-assigned value of the financial envelope allocated for the call for proposal. That means that you may have a pass mark of 60 or more, but due to the amount that is assigned to the call, you might not be awarded a grant. Applicants will be officially notified by email whether they have been awarded a grant or if they have not been successful. Successful candidates may then be contacted by your Caribbean Export to clarify items listed in the budget, their budget, before you sign their grant contract. Grant contracts will be dispatched by courier to beneficiaries outside of Barbados, while those residing in Barbados or the Dominican Republic may collect their contracts from the relevant office in Caribbean Export office. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. Any questions that you may have, we will now take any questions that you have, but we'd just like to remind you that the call closes on October 2nd, 4:30 p.m. Barbados time. All applications must be directed to the attention of the manager, Competitiveness and Export Promotion, Caribbean Export Development Agency, first floor, Beavat Tower, Warrens, St. Michael, Barbados. The outer envelope must bear the call for proposal number EDF 11 DS 2001. I wish to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We know how busy you are, and we really wish to say thank you for taking that time out of your busy schedule. So on behalf of my colleagues, Dani Sinanan, Janelle, Marie Noel, Tanya Cummins, and myself, I'm Sonia Boyne. Thank you and have a pleasant afternoon.